Yeah, okay.
It's running right now.
Okay. This is Mike Bilirakis. I'm here with Pat Palmer, who is going to share with us his history, having served in the military. And Pat, you continued your service and working with the VA afterwards for many, many years. And that's one of the things that I spoke very briefly at Gus's Academy Selection Committee group last night. He has a dinner every year for the nominees to the Academy as well as their families. And I told him about the veterans and how they, with all the sacrifices and all the time they spent away in the service of the military, when they do get out, they just continue on serving the community that they live in. And of course, that's what you're doing now, but that's after two careers in a sense, one in the military and then having served in the VA. So I'll let you do this in your own words, and if you want, I can maybe penetrate with some, or interrupt it, I guess, if you will, with some questions. But go ahead, Pat. Why don't you just tell us about yourself?
Okay. My name's Patrick Palmer, and I'm a Vietnam-era veteran of the United States Navy. Served 9 years. I didn't actually serve in Vietnam, but my brother did, and I had friends who did. And I'd like to tell you about one of those friends who served in Vietnam. His name is Gordon Alley Stokely. I became associated with Gordon through my association with his brother, Dennis. Dennis and I were stationed in the Navy in Mobile, Alabama, where we were assisting in converting an aircraft carrier into a communications relay ship. And since Dennis and I were both from the Clearwater area, we would take a day's vacation periodically and take off on a Friday and leave Thursday after work and drive down to Clearwater. And on those excursions down to Clearwater, we would often go out bowling, shooting pool, racing slot cars, and so forth. And we would take our younger brothers with us. My brother's name was Philip, and his brother's name was Gordon. They were both about the same age. And they really looked forward to our weekend excursions. And I learned to appreciate Gordon very much. His zest for life, and he always tried to do the best on everything he did. And he had high aspirations. Several years later, my brother Philip and Gordon both joined the U.S. Army, much to Dennis and I's chagrin, because we wanted them to join the United States Navy. But they both joined the Army, and separately they were shipped to Vietnam. My brother served his tour and came back okay. Gordon advanced rapidly, and he became a staff sergeant, became a leader of his group. And on the morning of December the 16th, 1971, he was leading his squad on a reconnaissance mission in South Vietnam, and he stepped on a landmine. And the recurring explosion took his life. And Gordon died in a foreign land, thousands of miles away from home and family, and his fiancée. And with him died his aspirations. He had planned to marry his fiancée upon the completion of his tour of duty. And also he had been saving for that Corvette that he wanted to buy. But those were gone now. And a short time later, his family received that knock at the door that every military family dreads to hear. Many years later, I had the honor of visiting the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. to look for his name etched in that wall of over 58,000 veterans. And even though it was a long time ago, the memory of that visit is still very vivid on my mind. I will never forget the flood of emotion I felt as I viewed the seemingly never-ending list of the names of the American men and women who have laid down their lives sacrificially upon the altar of freedom. It was a cold December morning, but the chill that swept over me and the tears that swelled in my eyes were not caused by the weather. I stood in silent contemplation, thinking of a friend taken from this life much too soon. And as I watched other people, some were walking as if in a daze, others were weeping openly. So each person reacted differently initially, but as I watched, it seems that every person reacted the same. They slowly reached out and touched the wall and caressed that name that they had come to find. Perhaps it was an endeavor to heal the hurting, or to reach out once again and touch that loved one and let them know how much they appreciated the price they had paid. After a while, I headed for the section of the wall that contained Gordon's name. I'll never forget it, 112W. And my eyes started searching eagerly over the multitude of names, eagerly searching, yet inwardly dreading to find his name. And suddenly it was there. And the flood of emotion felt by so many mourners before me overwhelmed me. And I stood there in quiet contemplation, remembering a friend. Like the others, eventually I reached out and touched the wall and caressed his name. And in so doing, I seemed to have developed an affinity with him and was letting him know that I appreciated what he had done. Eventually, I turned into the cold December wind and headed toward my hotel room. If you have ever visited the Vietnam Wall, you know what it means to have your emotions stirred by that inanimate object. Or perhaps you visited one of the many national cemeteries and viewed row upon row of identical white cross. Perhaps you knelt and read one of the names on those crosses. You too were touching the wall. I wish that every American could visit the Vietnam Memorial Wall. And I know it's not possible for all of us to visit our nation's capital. But you know, we have the marvelous opportunity of reaching out and touching the wall every day. We can touch the wall by recognizing the fact that those who did return deserve the very best that this nation has to offer. We can reach out and touch the wall by giving a veteran a pat on the back, a smile that says, "We appreciate what you have done." Our prayer should be for a world at peace, so that we can use our granted resources not for monuments to young men and women who have had their lives so unjustly and prematurely taken from them, but for headstones to world citizens who have lived long, peaceful, and normal lives. Until that day, let's keep touching the wall.
Thanks, Pat. What a powerful statement it certainly is. And you're right. I remember the wall was very controversial. There are many people who felt that it was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong memorial, the wrong design, the wrong everything, I guess, except for the location. But it's grown on us, and obviously those who go there. And I haven't looked at it recently, but when I was in Washington all those years, I'd go by it, and there are always some live ex-GIs there guarding the wall through rain, through snow, through everything else. It's quite an experience. I know we had a family, a couple from Clearwater Beach who became very close to me and Evelyn during our first campaign and every campaign afterwards. They've passed on now. They moved to Colorado where their daughter was, because I was the only child left. But they lost their only son in Vietnam. He was a flyer, I believe. He graduated from the Air Force Academy. She, it's really quite a story. I'm not going to give you her name, but she, and I'm going to go ahead and say this, in her mind, and she was a great conservative Republican, but in her mind she sort of blamed President H.W. Bush for her son being killed. That was in her mind. She was a very intelligent woman, one of those people who you want on your side no matter what your venture is, whatever the case might be. but she had this thing. She lost her only son, and I guess she was striving to throw blame. And I was with the president one day in Clearwater, and I told him, I know it hurt him because he's one of the warmest people I've ever known, but I told him about this story, and I said, she happens to be in the Clearwater Hospital right at this moment, which was true. And he said, well, give me her phone number. And so I got the phone number of the hospital and I gave him the name. And he picked up the phone in front of me and Evelyn. He picked up the telephone and called her and talked with her, which, and that was one of those little things that President H.W. Bush was famous for, writing personal notes to people, lying in longhand, things of that nature. But anyhow, that was quite an experience. And of course, every time I went to the wall, especially the first time, I would go into the book to find the flyers, her son's name, and would go and find it on the wall, and did exactly the same thing you did, even though I didn't know him personally. But you're right, and not should every American visit only Washington D.C., but they should go to the wall. They should go to the other military memorials up there, World War II, Korea, and they should attend one of the military cemeteries. I know I took my son Emmanuel, who's a doctor now, on a congressional trip to Normandy, and we went to the Normandy cemetery there, and it's just, I remember seeing one of the graves. A young man had just turned age 18, and he died the day that the war ended. Oh, and it just makes you feel, as you say, the lost opportunities, the lost life, and whatnot. But Pat, you also served for many years with the Veterans Administration. I know in Miami. I don't know about the rest of it. You may want to share some of that, but just the fact that you feel the way you do, your compassion, and the stories that you utter, the experience you had with this friend and your brother, of course, having served over there, and you of course served in the military, and even though you didn't go to Vietnam, you went where they told you to go. And that's something people have to realize, that every person who serves in the military is a hero, and the sacrifices of being away from home, from family, from friends, from jobs, is the same. And then you're there and you're assigned wherever they're going to assign you. But the fact that you had that history, I'm sure made you a much better employee, if I can call you that. I know you were an executive with the VA than the average person, because I know when I served in a Veterans Committee in Washington as vice chairman, much of the concerns that we had was that the employees of the VA just were not very courteous to the veteran. They almost considered them they were getting something for nothing, that sort of thing. That certainly never came from you or any of the people I'm sure you were over, because of your background and your experience. But you were gone for 9 years in the Navy, right?
Right.
And you then when you got out, you went that's when you went with the VA?
Not immediately, but later I actually went to work for Eastern Airlines, stayed with them till they went out of it, and then I went to work for the VA.
Well, now your background educationally was what? In terms of the subject matter, were you an engineer, or,
No, I have an MBA.
MBA, so business administration.
Right.
So you use that in your jobs
Exactly.
with Eastern and with the VA. Now, with the VA, was all of your VA time in Miami?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I can tell you, I didn't have a real close connection with the veterans because I was in the office, so I would get out periodically. And I remember one day that I was waiting on the elevator to take me up to the second floor where my office was, and I noticed across the hall, also waiting, was a veteran in a wheelchair, and a young lady was pushing his wheelchair, And she started caressing the side of his head, and she said, "It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right." And I could see on his face that it wasn't going to be all right, that he was having a really tough time. But her concern really impressed me. I wondered, was she his daughter? Was she his granddaughter? What association they had. So I just impulsively went over and took the guy's hand and said, "Brother, it's going to be all right." And he said, yeah, I know, it's going to be all right. And he wouldn't let go of my hand. And the elevator came, and they got on, so I got on with them. And they were going up to the 9th or 10th floor, so I went ahead and rode with them. And when he got off, I got off with him, and I shook his hand again, and I said, "Really, it's going to be all right." He said, "Yeah, I know."
Now, he was wounded from which war?
I would say World War II
World War II?
From his age. And so they went on down the hall, and I watched them go, and got a little tear in my eye. But, that's just another instance of where we can reach out and touch veterans every day and give them a little encouragement. But I enjoyed my association and my work at the VA. It was very rewarding. And as you say, sometimes employees just took it for granted. But majority of them are dedicated.
I'd like to think that they are, but I do know that that was probably our biggest problem, was attitude with the employees, year after year after year. But it's I talked to my sons over the years and my grandchildren now, and you mentioned the term the good war, and they kind of look at you funny when no war is obviously a good war. But as you know, the World War II was called the Good War, mainly because I guess there's a clear objective there, and everybody was united in that objective, fascism, if you will. But your war was Vietnam War, which was, of course, everybody's war, but guys like you served was a different sort of thing. And I guess we maybe got off on the wrong track, starting with Korea and then Vietnam, and now here we are, Afghanistan and Iraq. But there's God. God controls us all, and I guess He is the architect. As you and I have learned, He's the architect of the universe, and He decides these things for whatever reason. And I always tell people that the Old Testament is loaded with wars, war after war after war. So I guess it's something we're never going to overcome, even though we all want peace. Well, Pat, I loved your story, and it's great that it's going to be part of the archives. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add. You're finished up with the VA. You're retired back here in the Tarpon Springs area, Tarpon Springs, Clearwater area, and you're awfully busy. I know because I met you through another organization, and you're part of my son's Veterans Advisory Committee, and you're part of this group that's trying to generate these archives so that we can make permanent these stories from veterans. So it's a pleasure to know you, sir.
Thank you. Amen.
Thanks, man. Okay, I guess what we do?
Turn it off.
Turn it off.
I think it's on the way.
Might be that